Hello and welcome to Queer Legends and Oral History Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Dern. In this episode, I speak with Canadian singer-songwriter, social justice activist, and queer legend Lorraine Segato. Segato was lead vocalist, guitarist, and co-founder of Toronto-based The Parachute Club, along with fellow co-founder and drummer Billy Bryans and others from roughly 1982 to 1989. The song Rise Up from Parachute Club's first album became a queer anthem in the 1980s and 90s, at least in Canada. It won a Canadian Juno Award for Single of the Year, and the group snagged the Juno Award for Most Promising Group of the Year. 2 years later, they won the Juno for Best Group of the Year. In 2006, the Parachute Club was inducted into the Canadian Indies Hall of Fame. And in December 2022, Lorraine Segato was appointed a member to the Order of Canada, one of the country's highest honors, quote, for her contributions to the Canadian music scene and culture as a pioneer in 2S LGBTQI+ Canadian history, unquote. Most recently, in September of 2023, so not that long ago as I record this, Lorraine and the Parachute Club were inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame. So to get us started, I asked Lorraine, what is she up to these days?
This has been a really crazy busy year. It began with, I got a phone call from the government saying, you know, you're being awarded with the Order of Canada. So that was what? I was like, I was kind of paralyzed in the conversation because I thought maybe there was a mistake, you know? So it began with that. And that really got me thinking a lot about, oh my God, I really have to kind of double down on stuff and sort of really make, this life, mean something moving forward.
Well, the Order of Canada sort of put pressure on you to do more?
It did kind of, I did think, on the one level, it was really great because it gave me a kind of validity with my parents who always wondered, what is she doing? It gave me a kind of thing with them where they finally understood that my vocation, like the degree of my dedication to the issues that were important to me and to my work and that, like they got a piece around that. And that was kind of an incredible outcome for me. The other piece was when I thought nobody was paying attention. Obviously somebody had been paying attention to sort of the total body of it, of work. And so that was a beautiful validation. I'm in my 60s now, so it was kind of like, wow, now, okay, this frees me up to really want to do something. So that was one thing, busy year, beginning of the busy year. And then I got a phone call that they were inducting Parachute Club into the Canada's Walk of Fame. And I was like, oh, wow, this is kind of okay. That's great.
Were you surprised by that?
I was totally surprised by that. Like, listen, just traditionally in terms of all the Hall of Fame stuff that goes on, not a ton of women are actually recognized, and certainly not a group that's a political group that is, partially queer or queer positive and issue oriented, So I was really quite surprised by that. And I was grateful too, because a lot of those bands came out of the 70s and we were part of the late 70s, early 80s, or I was part of the late 70s and then the band was the 80s. It was a good reflection on how all the issues of that time really changed music, because Carol Pope was in that as well, which was fantastic, A Rough Trade. So I was grateful around that. And there were just a series of I guess you'd say, people recognizing the work that happened all this year, What I decided to do in my early 60s was I thought to myself, I want to do something with all the experience that I have. I want to mentor and I want to figure out a way forward where my only identity is not that of being an artist. So I joined my friend Mark Tewksbury, who has a business called Great Traits, and it's a leadership company, professional self-development leadership company for, of all people, corporate people. And I joined that organization. And so I'm a team leader within that organization. And I get to work with people around how to be better leaders in the world. And I get to, reflect on the things that did and did not work for me. And,
How does that experience translate into the work that you're doing now?
well, it totally, you're working in the music business. The music business is a corporation.
It's kind of a meat grinder, actually, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, all music and sort of creative industries are corporations of organizations of some form. So leadership, the sort of the principles of and the art and science of leadership, good leadership, applies across the board. So, I've done projects in front of the stage, on the stage, behind the stage. And so I was able to kind of gather all those experiences and going, what's useful for these folks?
Kind of brings me back to my earlier question of why were you surprised given all the work that you're doing? And I mean, to go back to the song of Rise Up, I mean, that song has become a cultural icon in and of itself. Were you surprised by that?
Yeah, I was totally surprised by that. The truth of the matter around that story is that when we were doing our first record, we were writing as we were in the studio at the same time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And it was one of the last songs that we actually were trying to complete for our debut record. And I wasn't even really that fond of it at that point. So, yeah, well, because, we had this groove, we had like the soca beat, we had the bass parts, we had beautiful thing, but the lyrics were yet to come together. And my friend Lynn Fernie, who is an artist and a poet and a filmmaker and everything, she had a whole bunch of sheets of paper, that I put together in the last minute at the studio and added some words, and Rise Up came up out of that, right? So it was kind of so last minute that I wasn't really attached to the song yet. And then when we finished it, everybody was like, oh, this is the first single. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And then the very first time I heard it, which was on a summer day and my windows were open and a car went by and the song was coming out of the radio, that's when I understood it had this incredible potential. It was
fun. It was a fun song
Yeah.
from the very beginning. It was like a song you could go driving to. It was a song you could go dancing to. It was a song you could use for activism, and it has been used for all kinds of activism. I believe at the time it started as queer activism, but the song was written in such a way that you could rise up, for anything, for civil rights. It could be queer rights. It could be feminism.
Exactly. Yes, feminism, environmentalism, like all the isms that are good isms. The isms where you want to change a world in which shared power is the concept, not showed power.
So even though the song came together last minute, I mean, it at its root, you still had this sort of idea of wanting to inspire people to do something.
Yeah, well, because the songs that we had been writing before were, political in nature, Boys Club and Are You Hungry? And, these kinds of songs. As we were sort of gathering our unique identity as a new band, we were, part of that was we wanted to be political, but we also wanted to be celebratory. We wanted to be a band that you could dance to, a band that you could feel joy around, a band that you could hear your own marginalized voice in, but also, it's that old saying, if it's not a revolution if you can't dance to it. That was really the premise of it,
Hence all the remixes.
Hence all the remixes, yeah.
Well, you've even got a new version out in the last 5 years, the Redux, which from the Parachute Club Collective, which is different than the other.
Yeah, and that was really, we couldn't figure out a name because really it wasn't the band who put that together. We didn't play on it. It was just a group of young artists that had agreed to sing on the project. There was a country version and then a pop version. And the purpose of that was really basically, I had been seeing all these young activists like Greta Thunberg and all these young activists, who were, out in the world. And I was thinking it would be really great to honor them by just doing this version of it and sort of see if it could, would take in some way. And it hasn't really taken in the way it did in the in the 80s, because the interesting thing about that song was it was a zeitgeist moment. It came out of a community of 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 time when you had the bathhouse raids, you had censorship problems, you had uh, police violence, you had all of these different issues, very much like the ones we have today.
I don't think it could be understated as well. What, the song came out in 83, I think it was. I mean,
Yes.
you also had the brand spanking new Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, where
Yep.
every community was using sort of a kick in the tires on it to see how far they could advance gay rights, women's rights, equality, all that sort of stuff. And then comes Rise Up, this catchy ditty that any activist could, throw into their playlist on a cassette and, march wherever.
Yes, and there have been times there's been like really interesting uses of the song. I remember being in the UK and they were like playing it on Christian radio, and they were talking about what it meant. Like there was just iteration, and I was like, and then
Really?
Yeah, there have
Did
been
they
times,
call you to do interviews and things, and you were kind of like, by the way,
yeah.
this is a queer band and a queer song, and you're kind of,
Yeah. Yeah, so there have been like not great times, and then we've had a couple of lawsuits around it too.
over what?
Well, the first one is that it was used in an orange juice commercial, and without our permission, and the second one was with McCain's Rising Crust Pizza or something. Our record company or our publishing company decided to lease the rights for an extraordinary amount of money to the company for that, and we had to fight that, and we won that lawsuit. And this doesn't just, it happens with other people as well. There are moments you have to defend what the song means to you. Like, we always felt like in many ways we were the caretakers of a concept, that, and what embodied the song. We had to kind of protect that a little bit. Rise Up was the only song on our record that we had a very specific clause that said the song could not be used for commercial, political, or religious reasons without the express consent of all of the writers. There are 5 writers. And so that's called a moral rights waiver. We did not waive that. So because of that, we were able to, every time there was a kind of a legal thing that came up, we were able to win back, the rights to the song and that. So, but it was the only song we actually protected in that particular way.
Well, it is a very important song. I remember hearing it all of my first Prides. Like, honestly, I've heard it at every Pride I've ever gone to, and I remember hearing multiple remixes of it at various clubs in Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver. It's very interesting to see how it has sort of survived this length of time. We're now at 40 years now, and just a few years ago you've done a remix of it, and it sounds really good.
He does it.
Yeah, I would dance to it. What are you talking about, girl?
Probably know more than I do. I'm grateful. What can I tell you? I'm grateful. It's one song of many that we've done, and it seems to have resonated in a really big way and in an extended way for people. And you can't plan that. Like, how do you even know that something is going to be that kind of a cultural and make that kind of cultural impact?
As you said, there was a whole bunch of things all happening at the exact, and it was just sort of the right timing. But you sort of say, well, we threw it together at the last minute. Well, some of your best work can happen under pressure, I guess.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Sure.
What's with the video? Can you explain? I watched the original video the other day, and I was never a really big video person because I was training to go into radio. Can you explain what the whole mime and everything was behind the original video with like the slow motion and like the freeze frames and the mime? Could you explain the mime?
The mime. Well, Lori Conger, our keyboard player, actually studied mime.
Okay.
And it was just meant to be this fun thing around like just diverse expressions of joy and community.
I'm not making fun because it was just.
It is kind of, I know, the mime.
It's like one of those. It's a 1980s low budget video thrown together on someone's camcorder as lickety split as possible. But it's It's fun. It's fun.
No, wait a minute. Where you're wrong is, well, it was
Sorry, I stand corrected.
No, well, it was a low budget film, but it was shot on film, not on a camcorder. It was shot on film.
I'm sorry.
That's important. As a person who studied film, it's important. No, listen. The pieces will, and also, and I saw it the other day because they've just released a double LP of the Parachute Club, for the 40th anniversary. Well, actually in November, they're releasing it. And on pink vinyl. We're excited.
Really?
Yeah, on pink vinyl. So it's an LP double on pink vinyl. And so what they've done is they've up-resed all the old videos, right? And so I had to see it and everything again, and I was...
You had to see it.
Well...
You say that like your eyes were like bleeding after having to look at it again.
No.
It was in your face.
Well, no, the thing is I don't really listen to or sort of travel down nostalgic lane very much. But because we were putting together this package, I had to spend a ton of time with the old material and then the old videos and looking at stuff. And trust me, there were times I was like, what were we thinking?
Okay, good. So it's not just me. It's
not just you. Like,
it is fun to go. It has been a blast to go back and look at this. And I'm really glad that you can poke fun at the video and stuff, but I'm glad that people, not just me, are understanding how important this song was, and it is finding new life. It may not necessarily be the huge hit in 2023 that it was 40 years ago, but you and the rest of your bandmates really have had a huge impact on activism over the last number of decades, and I think that's pretty awesome. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Well, we began before Parachute Club. I was in this band called Mama Kia, which was a 7-piece all-woman rock and roll band, feminist. They were pretty radical. They called themselves radical. I didn't, but we sort of all of us had cut our teeth, and especially with my partner too, Billy Bryans, my music partner, we had cut our teeth on benefits. Every place we played, it was a benefit of some form or another. So we came out of everything about our sensibility was really all about benefits. We didn't even imagine how that we would be playing any other venue than a benefit at some point, right? But what you got to check out is Boys Club. Boys Club, membership restricted to Boys Club. Because Boys Club is a really campy, like totally campy like funny costumes and just really ironic, fantastic little... When I look back at Boys Club, I'm like, oh my God, we had so much fun. We were all... I was dressed up in an RCMP outfit.
Those songs and the 1980s memories that they stir up were a lot of fun. Thank you for listening to my short conversation with queer legend Lorraine Segato. But before you go, I've got some news for you. Queer Legends was recently nominated for 2 2023 Canadian Podcast Awards, for Outstanding Documentary, and the second for Outstanding Society and Culture Series. Winners are expected to be announced in December of 2023. And if you'd like to get in touch with me or connect about an episode, or you've got a suggestion for someone to feature, you can now find us on X/Twitter and on Instagram as Queer Legends Pod. You can also help people just like you to become new listeners of Queer Legends by giving us a great review. This episode was researched, recorded, and produced by me, Sean Dern, and the executive producer is Ian Capstick. Queer Legends, an oral history podcast, is a Secret Agents production and is available wherever you go for great storytelling.